Have you ever heard the phrase that it takes 10 years to become an overnight success? My guest today is Dharma Yoga instructor and owner of Ojas Retreat Center, Gabrielle Kali Om. Gabrielle is living proof of the tenacity, fortitude, and growth that it takes to manifest a vision. Gabrielle first had a dream of living on a sailboat and sailing around the world. But even as that dream became a reality, she found herself searching for something more. Then one day a vision came, clear and undeniable, of a retreat center serving as a sanctuary for growth and healing. Yet Gabrielle's journey was anything but linear. Life took her on an unexpected path with challenges, heartbreak, and profound lessons that only deepened her connection to that ultimate dream. This is a story of resilience, transformation, and unwavering dedication to becoming the person that was capable of making this dream a reality. When I first met Gabrielle, I was so immediately inspired by her journey and her energy. And I knew immediately that I wanted to have her on the podcast. So I was so incredibly excited when she happened to come to New York and we were able to sit down and have this conversation. And now I am so grateful to be able to share that with you. Now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Gabrielle Kali Om. Our guest today is Gabrielle Kali Om. Gabrielle is a yoga teacher, retreat leader, and founder of Ojas Retreat Center in Southern California. With over 20 years of practice and more than 1,000 hours of training in styles such as Dharma, Shivananda, and Ashtanga Yoga, she was initiated into Sri Dharma Mitra's lineage as Yogini Kali Om in 2015. Rooted in the 8 limbs of yoga, her teaching integrates pranayama, meditation, chanting, relaxation, and challenging physical postures. Gabrielle has mentored at the Dharma Yoga Center in New York City and leads retreats and online classes. At Ojas Retreat Center, she provides a serene space for spiritual growth and healing. So welcome to the show, Gabrielle.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Such an honor to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on the show. I had the pleasure of actually attending your retreat in October.
Yeah.
And I had met you actually last year in April through our mutual friend Kyung, and I got to see Ojas for the first time and have dinner with you. It was so nice getting invited to have dinner with you. I was like, ooh, I get to see the retreat center, but then to actually experience the retreat at your center, and especially being a Dharma Yoga retreat, was just so incredibly special. So thank you for having me there.
I'm so happy you got to come.
Yes, and I'm so happy you're here today. I feel like we're getting to experience each of our things. Where I was sharing, it's like you live and breathe Ojas these days, and now you're in my apartment getting to live and breathe my podcast. So I'm so excited to have you here. We both were practicing with Dharma earlier today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Your podcast apartment.
100%. The space I happen to, I like to say that I live in a podcast studio, not that there's a podcast studio in my apartment, because that it has completely taken over my space, as you have now seen.
It works.
Yeah. And so I want to get started the way I start with every podcast, which is talking a little bit about purpose. So can you talk a little bit about what purpose means to you?
Yes, I think that's a great question and really important to me. It's actually something I think about all the time because I think it's a daily driver of attention and where to put attention. So what purpose is my purpose. Purpose is the thing that is propelling you in your everyday life towards whatever that is.
Yeah. So I have talked with you quite a bit, and I know that your journey has definitely taken lots of twists and turns over time. And I'm curious, like, when you think of the word purpose, do you feel like you were living with that before Dharma, or do you feel like when do you feel like that
Mm,
started becoming a thing that was kind of directing you?
Another great question. I think perhaps I was something I was searching for a long
Mm,
time, even before I could put into words what it was that felt was missing in my life. And I felt very different from a lot of people and people around me. And I didn't know why. I never quite felt like I fit in. And it just felt like there was something else.
mm,
And then, when a period of my life many years ago, I was really without what felt like a purpose. I was living a dream. At the time, I was sailing on my boat, and it was really strange because I had dreamed that this was a dream of mine, that I wanted to go sailing and live on a boat and sail in the oceans. And what I realized is, once we really got into it, it really felt like something was missing.
mm.
Even though I was living this dream that I had, and at one time that was the purpose. Everything was directed towards getting there.
Right.
And once it was there, it became, what are we doing here? Like,
Mm,
who are we serving? What's happening? We're in the ocean. This is beautiful, but not contributing to too much. And so, it not having or feeling devoid of purpose was, I think, something that really highlighted highlighted its necessity
that's
for
so
me.
interesting. So you were working in kind of, we were talking about like a corporate environment. Was that prior to living on the boat? I
A
take it.
corporate was prior to living on the boat. Yeah, I graduated from college with a business and entrepreneurship degree, actually.
Mm.
Uh, so somehow I knew at that time I wanted to have a business. It wasn't the business that I'm in. Nonetheless, to the entrepreneurship degree, there's a lot of finance involved. There's a lot of management involved, economic classes, marketing, every piece, accounting, every piece of running a business you have to engage with. Anyway, and after college, I went to work at a bank in a training program, and it was really not pleasant. It wasn't something. I just knew that I had to make a living somehow and I need to support myself, and
Mhm.
that's what you do, right? You find something to do and make some money to pay for your life, but it definitely wasn't my thing. So I tried to find a way to use the knowledge that I was gaining from the banking and direct it to something that felt a little bit better. Yeah, still wasn't the thing, but I ended up in mortgages,
Mm.
finance for home residential mortgages. And that was amazing because it was pretty good money, and I was still really young, so I was able to pay for my life. And at the time, actually, I lived on a sailboat that I bought, my first boat. And then I pivoted that mortgage, the finance piece of that, to yachts, to boats. So I specifically got into yacht financing.
Mm.
So most people don't know what that is, but it's kind of like mortgages for boats, and it's a whole thing.
I love that. I
Yeah,
love the like intersections that I'm already
yeah,
seeing around the different parts of your life.
yeah,
But I love this because I can definitely relate to this kind of journey where you're like, well, I know this wasn't it. So let me kind of move over here and then let me try and move over here. So I get it,
yeah,
that sense of like you're searching for something. you know that where you are is not quite it, and you're like, okay, let me try this thing. How is this going to work? And it's like getting you a little bit closer, or at least a little more interesting, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yes.
Especially with I'm like, I had no idea there was yacht financing. This is the funniest thing. And I'm like, of course you worked in yacht financing. Like, you are
Yeah.
the one person I would think that would fit. I love that. That is so funny. Okay, so continue on. So where do we go from yacht financing?
Well, from yacht financing, which was amazing, amazing. It's so much fun to work with the people in the boating industry and the marine industry around the water, which I love. Again, I was living on my sailboat at the time, so it was really huge, huge integration in my life, and it's very fun industry. There was a lot of drinking involved, a lot of entertaining, which is not part of my life at all now. But then it was absolutely seemed almost necessary. But I had a really good time and met such amazing people who all became almost like a family in that industry. It's really nice. And from there, during the time I was in that career, I also got married. And my husband and I, my ex-husband and I, we moved to California for his job, to Southern California, and he was a consultant, so we moved around. We moved around every couple years, or he did, and so that's how the next phase came.
Interesting. Wait, and so because I know at one point you were here in New York and you were living on your sailboat. Was
That's
this
right.
before or after? Like, where in the journey was that? I just
This is
need
going
to
to be a
know.
very long podcast. Okay, the whole timeline. All right, so we moved to Southern California for my ex-husband's job, and that was a couple of years we spent at the beach in Southern California. It was amazing. Had such a good time, and actually, I was working at a sailing school at that time to get knowledge, because our dream at that time was that we were going to leave the workforce and buy a sailboat and start to cruise, as they call it, travel around sailing in different places in the world. That was our goal.
Okay.
And after the couple years in California, we moved back to Maryland, to Baltimore, which is where I'm from, and we started looking for sailboats to buy. And at that time, my ex-husband's job was consulting here in New York, which was very helpful because I had already known and been practicing with Dharma. And we came here to New York, and then we also sailed a boat to New York.
Yeah, I had to highlight that just because I'm fascinated by the fact that you were here in New York, but you were living on a boat, which is not something that you come across very often, that you're
Yeah.
just like docked
Yeah, we were
somewhere.
docked in Long Island in Port Washington. Knowing nothing about that particular area, it was really amazing to be into these. They definitely thought that I was a foreign person. It definitely felt like I didn't belong there.
That is so funny.
But we had an apartment also in the city because he was working in the city, and the boat was in Long Island, so I spent most of the time on the boat, but I come to the city and go to the yoga classes, and that's when I spent a lot of time with Dharma.
Okay, so now, yes, because otherwise I'm going to rehash your entire life, but that still might happen here and there. But how did Dharma come into your life then?
That's how he came into my life. I was already a yoga teacher. So
Mm,
between California and while I was in Baltimore when we were looking for the boat, I became a yoga teacher.
okay.
And the reason I became a yoga teacher was, again, with the searching. Uh, my ex-husband, you see, I quit the yacht financing job and my career job to move to California, and I no longer
Mm,
had a job. And that was the first time in my life. And it was very confusing not to feel like I was contributing financially, but also didn't have a place to go every day. And
mm.
uh, it was odd because we didn't have kids, and there I am, just this young person still. At the time I was 30 years old, I guess, and I felt like I should be doing something, right? What do I do? And my ex-husband said, you should. Had been practicing yoga. He said, why don't you become a yoga teacher? You love it. You're good at it. And I thought, well, I believe I even said I could never be a yoga teacher. I will never know enough
Mm.
to, because the people that I was training with at that time, I really held in very high esteem. Hadn't met Dharma yet at that time, but I had been practicing at a Iyengar studio in Southern California, and the teachers, it wasn't only Iyengar. There was Iyengar teacher, a Anna Forrest teacher, Shiva Ray teacher, and I was getting so much out of the practices, really intense, that and these teachers in my mind, they were talking about philosophy. They knew a tremendous amount, and I was gaining so much information and knowledge and experience from them, but it didn't occur to me that I could be in that position.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm curious, like two things that I'm thinking about. One is like how kind of going through that challenge of no longer being the contributing partner and dealing with that. Like what was that really like? Because I can see that that's hard when you're like we're so wired, especially in American society, of you have to be productive, you have to be contributing, you have to make a lot of money. There it's wired in our brains. So how was that kind of going through and going against that?
For me, it was very challenging. At that particular time in my life, it may have been one of the greatest challenges I passed through emotionally, because I was raised to be an independent person. It was very clear
Mhm.
to me, although no one directly said it, which is even more of an interesting thing,
Yeah.
that once I graduated from college, I was going to be supporting myself.
Yeah. Oh,
And
interesting.
100%. And
Okay.
and so I knew that somehow, again, although no one said, "I'm never gonna help you out," or anything like that. My parents were incredibly supportive, but
Mm.
I was aware that this was my life, was my responsibility. And I bought my first boat by myself. I was 22 years old. I live
Mm.
on the boat, and it didn't seem, there wasn't a lot of room for unlimited choices, because the first obligation was we have to pay bills here, right?
Right.
So fast forward to this period of time where I'm no longer working and sort of financially contributing to my livelihood. It was difficult, and then of course we moved across the country. We had no friends.
Mm.
We didn't have any family there. We didn't know anyone. So that was also a piece of it. And uh, so I felt depressed, and I didn't even know what it was to feel depressed, but I was
Mm.
very down and really confused about sort of searching for this, what is this thing that I want to do? And my ex-husband, I remember saying at the time, this is an opportunity, you can do whatever you want. And no one in my life had ever told me
Mm.
that I could do whatever I wanted. I think that's actually a challenge now, that people
Yeah.
think that they should be able to do whatever they want, but I don't think so. I think within a an area you can do whatever you want, right? But
Yeah.
there's a piece that, like Dharma says sometimes, you live in society, you have to participate.
Yep. Yep.
That means you have an apartment, there's a rent, there's
Mhm.
there's bills to pay, right? So anyway, it felt very much difficult, to this idea of, oh, what do I want to do? I don't know. I never even quite asked myself that question. You
Yeah.
kind of find something that's like palatable, right?
Hmm.
Like something you can just
Yes.
kind of be okay enough with that you can live the rest of your life outside of work, maybe being somewhat happy.
Absolutely.
And that is really difficult because I was, oh, what am I interested in? What would I want to do? I was quite burned out on the finance stuff and the yacht financing, and that was a job that required a lot of time and energy. So I was looking for a different direction.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
Okay. So then what you were talking about on the other side of that is this idea of, oh, here's an option of becoming a yoga teacher, but that kind of, I mean, I would label as like imposter syndrome in essence, right? That seeing these teachers and going, well, I can't be one of them too. So what are your thoughts around that and kind of overcoming that imposter syndrome? Because you did end up becoming a yoga teacher.
I definitely did. I absolutely did. The way that I overcame it at the time was I recognized that that thought alone that I wasn't good enough was coming from my ego,
Mm,
the other side of the ego, which is more predominant in me, the one that, thinks that you're not good
yeah.
enough. And I thought, well, there's no way this is, I have to do it. Became more like, oh, once I recognized that, it became something that I had to do
Mm,
because I had to overcome this thought that was really just being created by my own mind. And ever since I was a kid, I would do things all the time that I was afraid of.
mm.
So I could try not to be afraid. I just naturally, I don't know why, but if I was afraid of something, I would do it as soon as I possibly could.
Wow.
So I could just say, okay,
What an incredible quality to have where you're like, oh, there's a fear. Let me go against it now. I love that. Because I think that's pretty rare. Like a lot of people, it's just like, no, we're going to like squirrel those away for safekeeping and not deal with them ever. So I'm obsessed.
Yeah. Well, becoming a yoga teacher was definitely, it was like a fear. It was thinking, first of all, you have to get up in front of people and
Hmm.
share something that you have to learn. And you have to
Hmm.
have a lot of knowledge, or at least in my opinion, I thought
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
would need a whole lot of knowledge to do that. And it was step by step, many trainings.
Okay, so I love this. I love your fear, take on fear, first off. But yeah, so you become a yoga teacher, you start, and then eventually you find Dharma and you start practicing with Dharma. So I know that there's this whole thing around Ojas and it being a very long thing. So can you tell us a little bit about when it first came in to your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I was here in New York. I think it was during that period of time that we had the sailboat here, and I was going to Dharma's classes all the time. And the first time I went, it was in the old studio on Third Avenue, and I was felt so out of my league and so humbled when I walked in the door. I realized I didn't know anything. And like I said, I was already a yoga teacher, and people from where I was from thought that I had some credibility, and I was kind of more one of the more advanced physical teachers in the
Hmm.
area. While going to Dharma's class, as you know, especially at that time, it was so I was so out of my league, and I thought, wow, I really want to learn more.
Mm.
And at that time, he was teaching psychic development classes. I believe it was Wednesday evenings, maybe Monday, I can't remember. Anyway, I was going to those psychic development classes, and he would guide us through, as you know, there's a series of mantras and concentration techniques and meditation. And the final part of the psychic development technique is to visualize something that you want to create. And at first, I thought it was just another thing that I wasn't good at, that I wasn't good enough at. And there was nothing that immediately came to my mind. And I remember this little moment of even judging myself about it, like that I couldn't even think of something, I wanted to create. But what I knew I wanted inside, because I was still this very perplexed time of not identifying this sort of next phase in my life, was that I wanted to be peaceful, that I wanted to be a person that was at ease
Mm.
with myself and with other people and with the world. And so I would visualize myself in that way in the psychic development of just whatever that looked like to me and whatever that would feel like to feel that sense of ease. And one day during the meditation, it came to me instead. It appeared to me instead of me conjuring it up, if that makes sense. Instead of thinking something or having a desire and then putting it into an image, it was more like the image, it just appeared, or the idea came to me that I would have a retreat center. And I was excited because I liked the idea. And I thought, oh, that, because I'm sure, when you have a realization, no matter what it is, it's so exciting, because for something to be clear is such a gift. And
Yeah.
when clarity arises, it's almost like doesn't even matter what it is. It's suddenly the right thing and you know it. And so that feels really great.
Yeah.
And it was like that. And then from then on, I said, okay, well, I know now I'm having this retreat center. Now let me visualize what that is.
Yeah. So I love this story because it really does highlight that thing where it's like, how often do people actually ask themselves, like, what do I want? And I think you were talking about that earlier as well, when you were kind of figuring out becoming the yoga teacher too, is this idea where it's like sometimes we're just going where life is taking us versus asking ourselves the question of what do I actually want to do? And I think it's a really challenging question because it brings up that notion of, well, what do you do when the answer is, I don't know? And I think that you were hitting that a lot in these contexts. And I think it's such like a part of the experience that I can completely relate to that, where I was just like, I don't know where I'm going, but I know I'm not doing what I'm doing right now, but I don't know where you're like the path disappears. And I think it's kind of, it's scary. And it's really nerve-wracking where you're just like, oh, what do I do now? What do I do with myself? And, I love that you kind of like, yoga started to come in and it started like getting a little clearer. But it's true. I love that idea where you're like, well, I just want to be at ease. It's like, let's start there and then see what comes up from there. So I think that's really compelling because it's interesting. I relate to that with this podcast actually, where it's like and I'm actually curious if you feel this way. Like, did it make sense to you to have a retreat center when it first came up, or what was like your initial reaction to it? Because when the podcast originally came up, I was like, that's a very weird idea for me. So I'm curious, like, did you feel like aligned with it when it came into your mind?
Not necessarily, because actually at the time we were living on a sailboat.
Right.
And we had this dream. We were already living a version of a dream that we created, which was its own purpose. And we were sort of, by the time the boat was in New York, we were sort of part-timing it. It's what I call our practice phase. Is we were getting enough knowledge to leave the mainland and, sail full time, leave our job, sail continuously for some unspecified period of time. So
Mm.
the time that we were coastal sailing was sort of practice for ourselves, getting enough knowledge and experience that we would need for the boat too,
Oh,
of our boat
interesting.
and how to operate the boat and all the systems. And it's like operating your own island and a mechanical island that needs to be fixed. And you need to. There's a lot of physical tools you need and knowledge tools you need for that. So anyway, I would just say it was really uh, something that wasn't. I don't know, how do you say, like a
It
bit.
didn't seem like it was in sync with the direction you were going in, it sounds like.
Yeah, it seemed like it's not something that's going to happen now.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it's so interesting because I love what you were saying about how the sailboat was your purpose and your direction, and it was the thing that you were like, this is what I'm moving towards, and this is what everything is aligning with, right? And so this retreat center idea kind of goes against this, like, I'm just going to sail around and not be fixed anywhere.
Totally. And I think what then we sort of morphed into was this idea that, well, okay, well, we'll sail around and we'll probably at some time, maybe, I don't know, maybe some island will resonate with us. Maybe we'll be tired of sailing, I don't know, and maybe we'll get to a spot that feels nice and maybe that place will have the retreat center.
Hmm. Okay, so it was like this will
I
come.
connected the dots.
Yes.
Yeah. By force. Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
It's always a way,
Right.
to move with grace, from one thing and to a little bit over here, and then.
This can work in
Yeah,
here somehow.
yeah.
We can force fit it.
Yeah.
Yes, I can definitely see that. You're like, well, we'll be sailing and then we'll come somewhere and then like that will be the space.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see how the island plays in where you're like, okay, the island, the boat,
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
Putting the pieces together. Okay, so at this point, Ojas is kind of, well, Ojas wasn't existing, but this idea of a retreat center, it sounds like you had kind of accepted it and plotted it in somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but you kept using this as like your visualization for psychic
Yeah.
from that point on.
Yeah. Continuously. Never changed.
Interesting. Do you feel like, because obviously it's been a long journey, but do you feel like there were ever points along the journey where you wavered from that being the thing you were going to do?
No.
I love that.
No. I don't think there was a moment that, and there were a lot of challenging moments from the sailboat to Ojas, uh, but it was always something that was going to happen.
Okay. I love that. You're like, I'm crystal clear. I don't know when and where, but it's going to come.
Yeah.
Right. So then what was kind of the next step? Like, you're like, I have the vision. I know where I'm going. I don't know how to get there. I still am planning to sail around the world, and that's the purpose. And before I get into the next thing, I'm curious, like, do you feel that being of service was something that was important to you, like, through this journey? Because I think that is a huge part of being a yoga teacher. But I'm curious, like, how did that fit in to everything?
I wouldn't have framed it that way. I probably didn't have that idea. And being of service is, of course, it's not just a yoga idea, but
Of
it's
course.
very much in the yoga lineage, serving. And not as a yoga teacher, I'm necessarily just serving in any capacity.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I used that language in my own mind or in my speech. I think the only thing I remember articulating to myself is that I didn't feel that I was contributing. Like, what am this
Mm.
constant idea of what am I doing? Like, what am I doing?
Mm.
And I even remember I asked my dad once this question because, and I was probably not long after college working in the bank, and I thought, this is not it, right? How can I be doing this for the rest of my life? And my dad was in banking and finance. So he had some idea of what I was doing, and also we were quite close. And we would talk about a lot of life things. And one day I was like, Dad, like we're on the phone, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like this is what I'm doing? Like really? This is gonna be it. And he had such a great way, and it's gonna sound a little depressing, and hopefully this will help somebody out there. And obviously, it resonated with me at the time enough that I remember it today because he said, Gabrielle, you're living in society, you're paying taxes, you're going to work, just by contributing to society, you're helping.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, that first of all, it struck me that that was his perspective, and
Mm.
also that was, I don't know, I never asked him if he would say that that felt like enough,
Yeah.
for him. I mean, I had two sisters and my mother, and he was, supporting all of us and all of our endeavors and our colleges and the whole thing. And so I just thought it was so beautiful that he was so sort of his purpose was us, was the
Mhm.
family and providing for the family. And he was never wavered from that. And it was a single moment. He never seemed like he was not content
Mm.
and never seemed like he was searching for something else.
I love that.
And that's really very grounded, like
Yeah.
very nice to have that response. But I knew it wasn't enough for me.
Yeah.
I knew that that wasn't going to be enough to hold me. Just the idea that I would be paying taxes.
I love that. I think it is really beautiful when you reflect and you go, I love that this is enough for you, but you can also simultaneously be like, but that's not enough for me. And it's like allowing yourself to hold space for both of those kind of truths where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that is enough for my dad. And like he gets to live in this life and providing for us
Yeah.
is great for him, but that's not quite my path.
Mhm.
And, I think you were saying at the beginning this idea of like, I didn't feel like I quite fit in. I can definitely relate to that feeling where it's just like, this quite isn't quite it. And it works for other people. And I'm like, that's great. But there's something inside of some of us that's going, oh no, there's something else out there for me. And I have to go look for it. And I don't know, I guess that's how we end up on this couch right now. But
Yeah, it's not a easy path.
yeah,
The path of the searcher is
agreed.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous of people. I know many people in my life that were just felt so content being in
Mm.
one place and doing one thing. And I thought, oh, wow, I wish I felt like that. Just okay to say, yeah, I want to have a family and a dog and a backyard and whatever it is. But it never came to me like that, so
Yeah.
we all have our own, I guess, our own calling, if you want to say it like that, or
Yeah.
even our own purpose. And we have to live according to our nature and our tendencies. Otherwise, we feel like something's missing, and that's a very hard place to be.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Do you feel like being around Dharma was influencing you as well? And like the teachings from Dharma? As far as like moving in this kind of direction, or how do you feel like that was influencing you
In
in finding your purpose?
in
Yeah.
finding the purpose of this sense of the retreat center, I don't know, maybe he psychically gave me that purpose. I don't know. And it- but what I did get very shortly after that, so the 500-hour teacher training started, and I was in the 500-hour
Mhm.
teacher training, and I learned so much from him about philosophy, about the, the nature of consciousness as we understand it and know it, about the path of yoga, and really living the life of a yogi. And I was very connected to that. I felt very connected to that because I received the benefits. I mean, as you know, during the teacher training internship, you have to do many, many practices, including a diet, and it was all very time consuming. And at the time I was doing all those practices, by the way, on our
I was
sailboat.
gonna ask.
And that was a whole other interesting component. But I was gaining so much from it. So much awarenesses, and believe me, I had so much more to know and so much more to do. And when I went into the teacher training, into dharmas, at that point I was thinking, I was already a yoga teacher again, but I knew that I wanted to know more specifically about philosophy, but also I wanted to continue involved in the physical yoga. And I had this idea that I wanted to be able to answer any question that anyone would ever ask me, any philosophical, and I thought that that was
Wow.
reasonable. I thought that was a
Wow.
reasonable thing to assume that I would eventually be able to do, which is
That's an incredible
ridiculous.
goal.
Ridiculous, right? So ridiculous. And that goes to show you how little I knew, right? How little and how far I had to go. Is the idea that I really was striving or thinking that that was
Mm,
attainable.
right.
And I sort of very quickly, it didn't take long, training with Dharma, to understand that there was no way that I was
Know
going to
it
know that.
all.
Yeah, and I thought, well, where do I go from here? If I can't answer the questions, if I don't know the answers, what kind of teacher doesn't know the answers,
Mm,
right?
it's so humbling.
Yeah, it really, really is. And I tried so many times. I had so many questions, and as you know, it's not easy for me anyway. I don't think for you either, an introverted person, to ask a question to Dharma, especially in front of
Yeah.
60 people. And
Mm-hmm.
teacher training, it takes a little nerve to, when he says, "Any questions?" but he's looking like daring you to ask a
Yeah.
question, and you get enough nerve to raise your hand, and that is just shows how desperate
Mm.
I was, right? You have enough nerve to raise your hand and ask something. And I can't remember what my questions were, but I remember the answers. I remember Dharma looking right at me, question after question, right, almost seemed through me, and shrugging his shoulders and saying, "I don't know."
Mm.
And I was so frustrated by that response because I knew that he knew. And I thought, I know he knows. He's just not telling me. He's not telling me the answer. And there I was, ready to write it down in my book, right? Or
Yes.
whatever it was, because I'm collecting answers. You see, and
Yeah.
that's what I realized. I was seeking to collect these answers, but I wasn't seeking to understand them or to embody what the answers were,
Mm.
or even where the questions were coming from. And so very quickly I realized from him, I thought, okay, after several days, I was like, I got it. Like he's telling me, like, and he actually says this now, like in words, you figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so many times I thought, okay, well, I guess I better figure it out because, he's not telling me, so I'm going to
Right.
figure it out. And that's what you get from all of the meditations and all the pranayamas and all of the practice and the discipline. You receive the answers, right?
Yeah.
They're not handed to you.
Hmm. I love that also because it's like Dharma is a little bit of magic, and I feel like he's always teaching us in ways that we don't realize it in the moment. And it's like, to me, it's like he's also teaching you that as a teacher, you can answer with not an answer. And, it's challenging the fact that you were going, I need to be the teacher and be able to, right off the bat, be able to answer everything. But he's modeling to you the
Exactly.
exact opposite. And I love that because you're also going, but I know you know the answer,
Yeah.
which is even funnier to the whole situation. But, I love the undertone of the actual answer is hidden within the answer kind of thing. And I feel like he does that to us all the time where I'm like,
Hmm.
he knows what we need. And I always think that's his magic, where he's like, he knows exactly what we need to be receiving to give us the actual answer, even when we
Hmm.
don't want to hear it.
Hmm.
And that right there, I feel like is a great example of that.
Really, really, truly is.
Yeah. So now I'm curious just to go in a bit of a different direction because I'm like, we still have to get from like here to Ojas and like otherwise we're gonna talk forever, which granted, I love talking with you. But I'm curious because it's like you have this vision, you're thinking you're going on the sailboat. So can you kind of give us kind of what was the next thing to actually making a retreat center happen from there?
From
Did
the
you Yeah,
sailboat?
from the sailboat. So, yeah, you got to take us a little bit on the journey.
Okay. Continuing the journey, where my ex-husband and I are on the sailboat, and again, we're going along, we're sailing along, and I think both of us it was a challenging lifestyle. It
Mm.
was incredibly simple as a lifestyle, but not easy in any way. And it wasn't easy for me. And while we had collected all these tools and how to fix the boat and how to learn about all these things, it's so much like yoga and life. You think that you're getting all the knowledges that you need, but emotionally, we were sort of unraveling, and we ended up splitting up and sailing our boat back to the East Coast and selling the boat. And then my ex-husband and I, we went our separate ways. Very shortly after that, within that, while all this is happening, this phone call from my dad that my mom was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm. I'm so sorry.
And I thought, oh my gosh, like, I guess I'm staying here. You see,
Mm.
because we sailed a boat back, but I had no
Mm.
intention of staying and
Interesting
and
timing.
living right in Baltimore. But when that news came, it was, well, this is I this is what I'm doing. And it was very, very challenging time in my life, the most challenging time ever. And it's so hard because here I'm grieving the loss of marriage and also the loss of our lifestyle. I mean, we had
Mhm.
been living this dream on the sailboat. And when we came back, we had no jobs. We didn't have a car. We didn't have cell phones. I didn't have a computer. I mean, I might have had a computer. Yeah, we did. It was there.
Yeah.
I am again at square. What am I doing? What's happening now? Right? And it was really confusing, just emotionally so difficult. Usually, right, when people split up, maybe one person moves out of the apartment, but they still go to the job the next day, right? Or
Right.
something like this. And there's a way to work through it, but it was so much loss, and then the shock of my mother being diagnosed with cancer, and then sort of working that into it. I became almost I was really down in a really emotional way. I was depressed. But I didn't even know like that's what it was. I didn't know the word for that, and it was just so challenging. And but the part that was amazing was that my dad said, "Here, I have we're getting a new car, take this car." And my sister and her husband, they have an apartment attached to their house. No one was there living in it. Oh, come to live in the apartment, and it's okay. And then I went to the yoga studio in Baltimore where I used to teach, and I just showed up there for class, and it's the owner, and she came right to me. What are you doing here? Because everyone knew, you see, that I was sailing. So also this all became very public. There was no way to really hide from anyone, that I was going through such a challenging time, or the people that knew me, because everyone thought, "Oh, what are you doing? Why aren't you sailing? Aren't you supposed to be on
Right.
the boat?" And then you have to explain,
Right.
the whole
Right.
story. And the teacher said, "Well, what do you need?" I said, "I need to teach. I need to work." And that was the start of my full-time yoga career. And she said, "Come back tomorrow and we'll talk." And so in a matter of days, I somehow had a car, I had a place to live, I had a job.
Amazing.
And like, I guess, yeah, and I was very sad, but all of those things really helped, keep me going every day, to show up for other people. Best thing to do when you're struggling is to show up. Just show up at someone else, or whatever you have to
Yeah.
do. So all of the teaching that I was doing, and showing up for classes, and was integral in such a big part of my healing. And it's so interesting because, the people in the classes at the time, they had no idea, right? They don't know what you're going through.
Yeah.
They're just showing up for class.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I love this because it's like the power of like the connections that you already had kind of helping you rebuild after such a
Hmm.
challenging time, or through such a challenging time rather. So I'm curious then, that kind of gave you kind of like this level, I guess, kind of, right? Like it gave you foundation again in a
Hmm.
way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I needed that. I was
Hmm.
very, as you can imagine, sailing on a boat is ungrounding. You
Right.
don't have, really need some tools. And at that time, despite the fact that I had already, many years of practicing and teaching yoga, there was a big piece that was missing for me. And I projected a lot of what I thought I should be doing, or the knowledge that I thought I should have. And I'm trying to embody something that didn't
Mm.
really exist for me. It was an idea, a philosophical theory that I was trying to apply to myself. But that doesn't work because, like, we're living in a human condition, and we're in a reality that's our creation. And you cannot apply some conscious ultimate reality theory to a relative human being, right? It doesn't work that way.
Absolutely.
But I didn't know that. at the time. And that's something I really try to emphasize moving forward when I'm mentoring people or helping teacher trainings or leading teacher trainings, is like really try to be clear on what it means to pass through and go through this process.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's such an interesting journey where, and I feel this a lot in all the things you've been sharing of like the person you're becoming, and you were holding such high ideals through this process of like, this is what a yoga teacher should be.
Mm-hmm.
And versus who am I right now? And so trying to reach to that ideal that you were setting for yourself was creating a lot of these challenges that were, and then it was kind of like having to sort out like, what am I actually doing and what do I need to do to embody, I guess, the
Mm-hmm.
teacher that I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like that's the sense I'm getting.
Yeah. Yeah. It was more for me like perhaps not allowing the ideas of other people around me, other people's projections.
Mm.
Because, at that time, and I think the more and more people know, the more and more people know now, uh, I think the less susceptible we all are to this. I think more and more language, whether it's in the yoga community or outside the yoga community, more and more people understand this idea of feeling what's present for you
Mm-hmm.
and not trying to, oh, I'm a yogi, I'm not supposed to feel like that,
Right.
or
Right.
I'm not supposed to think like that,
Mm.
or use your, I don't know if anyone ever said this to you, use your yoga.
No, I haven't had that one come up.
Terrible, I mean,
Yeah.
because it's just a lack of understanding.
Mm.
It's a lack of understanding.
It's like
Can't
spiritual
I thought you
bypassing.
were a yogi.
Mm.
And so already other people, right, putting this like idea of, because what they're really just doing is, oh, they're projecting their own idea onto you and what they think that you're supposed to be now that you're in this position. I don't know. It doesn't matter how they get their idea. But it's really hard because it was aligned. You see, it was aligned with what I was thinking. Yeah, I am supposed to be like that. I am supposed to be a yogi, right? I'm not supposed to, feel like this or think like this. Uh, and so it's a lot of, I would say, disidentifying or avoiding maybe thoughts or conflicts or emotions in favor of something more idyllic or something that I thought was, the essence of where I wanted to go.
That's so interesting because I think it's this idea. I don't know if we're necessarily doing it on purpose, but it's like we were trying to paint a prettier picture in a way where it's like we want to be like this version of what we think it should be like versus the reality of like of being a human being in a human life and dealing with the trials and tribulations of that.
I feel that, many, we do that. It's our nature, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like even the big fish story, the fisherman's story about how big the fish is they caught, right? Like always a little bit like putting things in the best frame,
Mm-hmm.
to
Absolutely.
project to the world.
Yeah, that's fair. We had a pause because I ran out of storage on my SD card. And then we started having a conversation about our conditions. So actually I want to kind of pivot into that. And I'm curious like how you feel like your conditions align with where you ended up.
Oh man. Uh, my condition. First, you would have to identify what the condition is. In philosophy, you have to identify or define terms, right? So, everyone knows what you're talking about. And in order to think about I would have to know even what I feel my condition is. And I do know something about my condition, or nature, as you want to call it, or tendency, that it's natural, right? We're
Yeah.
all born with some natural tendencies. And then our natural tendency is influenced by our upbringing and by society and our friendships and our jobs and whatever, all of the choices that we choose in our lifetime influences this nature.
Yes.
And we can, as you know, we can go against nature, we can try to move with our nature. And I think one of the gifts is sort of in the yoga practice and in just any wellness, any type of wellness atmosphere, is this idea of, tuning in to your own condition, to your own nature. Like what does that mean? What is your nature? Because surely the two of us, we don't have the same nature. So it means we aren't going to be doing the same thing, hopefully. And if we try to, we're going to have an internal conflict.
Yeah.
So I think there's an answer in there somewhere, in that, over all these tries, look at all the things I've already talked about in my life, all of these attempts at living in peace and happiness in myself, because I really did want that. And I knew I wanted that. I wanted to feel at peace. I wanted to be happy. And I had no idea how I was going to do that. And that, I think most people don't know how they're going to do that.
Yeah.
And I think so. My nature, or my condition, is such that I was not content. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been searching for a purpose. Is that my nature is not simply to be content. And actually, this is why our sailboat was named Santosha,
Interesting.
which is contentment.
Yes.
That is contentment is a state of being. And I really knew that I wanted that. I knew that one, I didn't feel content, and two, that I wanted to feel content. And so my condition was, always, school was very hard for me. It was difficult for me to concentrate. I was not a very good intellectual student. I might have a lot of abilities, but they weren't associated with academics. I had to try really hard to get good grades, and so that's part of my condition. From whatever reason that it came, and a lack of ability to pay attention for a long time and be focused. And because of that, I learned tremendous amount of tools in organization. And I'm a really organized person, but I believe that I am out of necessity, because it was, what do you call it when you have a condition that you're, like almost, it was a way to manage something that was really challenging for me, is to be organized. And I picked up that skill. My family is really organized. My mother, incredibly organized. So I lived an organized life, which was extremely helpful, because I was, in my mind, I was all over the place, and it was hard to me to stay focused.
Yeah. All right. So now it's interesting, because part of what I know about your story is that you ended up kind of going from, having this settled life, teaching yoga, to running retreats like all over the world. So how did that start?
Yeah, so the retreats came in at the point of time when I had learned, as we were saying, that my mom was sick, and I had split up with my husband, and I was living in Baltimore and teaching a lot of yoga. And I don't know why, a lot of people started coming to my yoga classes, and I became a well-known teacher. And people wanted to do things. They were asking me to lead teacher trainings and retreats. And well, if I'm going to have a retreat center, I better start
Mm.
leading retreats. I better figure out what I'm supposed to be doing because I had never been on a retreat even. I never even, so I led very first retreat with a co-teacher who was a friend of mine, and it was amazing. It was in the Caribbean islands and the Virgin Islands, and it was incredible. We taught all the classes. We made all the food, all plant-based and gluten-free, the two of us, and somehow taught all of the classes all day and nighttime sessions and cleaned everything up. It was an incredible experience in learning what not to do and also some of what was so beautiful about it. But I loved it. I loved it. And from that point on, people were really just saying, what's next?
Mm.
Where can we go next? When's your next retreat? And so I felt like a little bit of a travel agent because I was coming up with these places. And the way that I decided where to go is that people would just say, can we do a retreat in this place? And I might have absolutely no desire to go to that place. You see, I mean, one of the other retreats I led was a friend of mine, now a student, said, could you lead a retreat on my family's vineyard in France?
Whoa.
And I was like, okay. I mean, I guess, right? I'd never even been to France at the time. And
I
then we ended up leading the Swami Kashi and I. So I call up Swami Kashi, who's a
Yeah.
great friend of mine and someone I met at the Shivananda ashram. I said, do you want to lead this retreat in France? And he said, okay. It's hilarious because we're vegan, plant-based, we don't drink, and now we're on a vineyard in France trying to lead a yoga retreat. And it was amazing because there was one vegan woman in the whole town that owned a restaurant. She shut it down to cook for us,
Oh.
and the vineyard was so beautiful. It was amazing. And then every time we were someplace, everyone, where can we go next? Where are we going next? And went like that for years.
I feel like you're really embodying being a dry leaf in the wind is the feeling that I'm getting. I mean, I feel that a lot about your story. There's a lot of I'm a dry leaf in the wind, like even the sailing
Yeah.
feels like that, right? Where you're like, I go where the ocean takes me. In this case, you're going where the plane takes you.
Right.
So that's so interesting. And so you're doing this for years. But in the back of your head, you're going to have a retreat center.
Hmm.
And I mean, was there a point where you're like, okay, now it's time? Or did you kind of just let it sit there stewing in the background?
Yeah,
Now that you're back on land.
I let it be in the background for a long time because you see, my mom was
Mm,
sick, and my mom's cancer diagnosis was not it was originally curable.
mm,
And so the time frame that we were told was that it would be about 14 months of certain type of treatment and operations, and then she should be fine. Well, after that 14 months came, uh, we got the news that the cancer had metastasized,
mm.
and so it became incurable.
Yeah.
And then I had this whole 14 months, I thought, okay, after this,
Right.
I'm going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
That's what was in my mind. Like, I was really not still staying, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
staying here.
Right. Right.
And then we learned that piece, and I remember in my mind, I was there in the doctor's office, and I thought, I guess I live here.
Like it hit you in that moment.
Yeah. And it, again, it was already such a challenging time in my life and my family's life, with all of the treatments that were going on and helping a family. And it just continued. it continued like that. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm just here. And then I think in my mind shifted to I'm leaving in this specified period of time to I'm here for an unspecified period of time.
Mm.
And what am I going to do? So I went more in on yoga teaching. I started leading teacher trainings, even more retreats. So I knew that it wasn't the time to have the retreat center.
Right, right.
But even though I knew that, I think a piece that I haven't said yet is that I was looking online,
Mm.
and everywhere I went in my mind, I was making notes. I was receiving feedback, on a
Right.
cellular level of every place I was and what it felt like. Is gaining so much insight and
Mm.
knowledge on not just retreat spaces themselves, how to run a retreat, what is like uh, to put myself in the facilities perspective and the areas that I was in, what those felt like to me. So it was really beautiful period of time.
Do you feel like there was any level of like frustration that you like through this whole period of I have this plan, but it keeps being put off, put off, put off?
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like a horrible thing to say, because
Mm.
here we are with my mom, who I love so much,
Of course.
and my dad, and we're all in on, it's if you or anyone listening has ever been in this situation, it's really challenging. First of all, if you're living with a patient or someone who needs care, it's so important to advocate for them, and you really have to be present.
Yeah.
And with all of the treatments and the doctors and having a condition such as cancer, it's not just, it's a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could, one day my mom, I mean, we're out shopping and eating lunch and she's just 100% fine. And next day she could be in the hospital for 5 days, and then she comes out, and then 2 days later we're back at the store again. You see, it's like, it's wild. And
Yeah.
and the period, and it's a lot because of treatments. This is a whole
Mm.
different conversation, but it's so challenging on the person's body,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have cancer and to be receiving the treatments. It's very difficult for the organs, and because of that you get depleted in so many different ways, and then you end up in the hospital with depletion that then needs to be
Mm.
replenished. And that takes days once
Yeah.
you become in that condition. And then the whole cycle starts again. And so whenever my mom would go into the hospital, we were all there at the hospital every day.
Yeah.
Oh, mom's in. Okay, we're at the hospital. I was driving to the yoga class from the hospital and back to the hospital from the yoga class, and helping my sister at the time had two young kids, and then we would trade off. Who's at times. It was a lot of coordination. So, it was like that for years.
I think that's so challenging because it was such an extended period of time, and it's in one way, of course, it's like a gift, right? That you can be there, that you're able to be present, especially through this time, and be there physically with your mom and your family. And then on the other side, it's like your life and the things that you were aspiring to is put on hold.
I felt like, yeah, and you could easily feel very selfish by thinking something like that.
Yeah.
This isn't where I want to be. I don't want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
It, but for me, luckily, I knew, and this is because of the evolution of my practice, I knew that that was my practice.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
knew it, and was amazing to know it, because if I didn't, I would have
Mm.
been really suffering a lot more
Yeah.
than the challenges that were already facing us. I mean, I knew that, okay, I'm in the hospital, I'm present, I'm about to go teach a yoga class, I'm going to be present. And the ability to shift presence became my practice. And it's amazing when you use what's going on in your life for practice, the strength that you can gain from that is tremendous. And I gained so much from that great period of suffering in my life and feeling very alone. As I said, my husband and I had split up, and I felt so alone because when you're driving back from a hospital or someone in your life is sick and you have no one to share anything with and no one to call, and it was just very sad. Very sad. I felt really alone and lonely. And I had never felt that in my life. Like, I actually didn't even know what that feeling was.
Right.
And that was amazing. So I used this time to sort of learn about myself, to learn even, it taught me a lot about other people because I feel like I was not connected to that so much when people shared other emotions. I frankly didn't understand what they were even talking about. I didn't know what lonely was. I didn't know what regret was. I didn't know, never had these experiences in my life. And I thought, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
This is, I get to feel this, so I don't have to continue feeling it. So it doesn't hold me, right? So I make sure, oh, let me really get into this so it doesn't hold me.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you so much for sharing because I know it's a lot, to really be able to verbalize like those difficult times in our lives. Like it's something like is not natural for us to share.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that first off. But I really appreciate what you said there about allowing it to be the practice and allowing it to just like I see it as kind of like surrender to what is and what you're experiencing and be present and be in like what you're experiencing in that moment and take that time to be with your family and take that time even though it might not be like that became your purpose in essence is how I like to think of it, right? Like your purpose was your family through that time period.
Absolutely. And in the background, in the meantime, somehow I was developing this whole yoga community in Baltimore and people that were, there were so many beautiful things about that time
Yeah.
as well that had, uh, and what's interesting is people didn't even really know, the students, they didn't know that I'm facing all these challenges. And I think what they probably didn't know too is how much they helped me, just by showing up to class.
Yeah.
And it was amazing because it sometimes people ask me, other yoga teachers or people in wellness communities, sort of what you were mentioning earlier about the imposter syndrome. You feel like, oh, I'm being fake, I'm pretending, this. I'm like, no, you're not pretending. You're being 100% authentic in that moment. And the moments, if you can do that, the moments are just shifting. Here I am authentic in this space and I'm authentic in the yoga class. You should drive to a yoga class in the hospital crying, like wondering how I'm going to go inside and teach and taking a few breaths outside. And I thought, okay, now I'm going to show up for this. I'm here for this.
Yeah.
And you just, it's an unbelievable practice.
That's incredible.
And it's really the practice of showing up for what's there in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I also love how it's like, yeah, it's like, yes, you're not actively creating the retreat center and you're being gifted almost all these little seeds that are going towards it, nevertheless, right? Like through leading the retreats, through being with your students, through all these experiences. So it's like, it's interesting because I see it as like you're still being gifted these little pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely. No question. No question. I mean, I might have visualized that I wanted a retreat center well before this, but I was not equipped to have it, to manage it, even financially. I was
Mm.
not equipped in any way
Hmm.
to take on, such a thing. And all of these events, and all of these practices and the way that you put your practice into your life is strength. It helped me gain the strength and knowledge that I needed to build Ojas.
Amazing. So that we're not talking here for literally hours and hours on end, I do feel like I need to speed up the timeline, but can you tell us like what made it so that you actually finally were like, this is the time to make it
Yeah,
happen?
perfect. So it was COVID. It was
Okay.
COVID.
Yeah.
COVID made the time. My mom passed away.
I'm so
Uh,
sorry.
Thank you. And but at that time, I thought, well, now's not the time to leave. I had created all of this stuff and I can just get up. And what didn't feel right to get up and leave. So I continued to lead teacher trainings, to lead retreats, to come here at the Dharma Center and mentor teacher trainings. Is such a beautiful time. And then when COVID started, I was leading retreats in Bali back to back. I was in Bali for about 5 weeks. And at the end, it somehow everyone in our group was able to get back safely.
Amazing.
Absolutely amazing. So this is whatever March of
Mm-hmm.
2020, right? That's the day, I guess, the date.
Yes.
And we didn't know how bad it was, quite to say. We were in Bali. Everyone knew what was going on. No, there were no cases reported.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was really happening. They weren't instituting any precautions or anything like that. So we're just going about everything normally and fly back to the States. And next day, I go to my yoga class and I go to hug everybody like normal. And everyone's, got their arms length distance. And whoa, people are wearing masks. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
What's happening here? Okay. And I think that was 2 days later. That weekend, I was leading a teacher training, and the manager came to studio. He said, "What time is this class over?" I said 4 o'clock, and he said, "Okay, that's when we're closing
Wow.
for good."
Like forever.
Yeah,
Wow.
and that was yeah.
So you're
For the,
like,
the
that's
whole
it.
pandemic.
Yeah.
So I was in the middle of a couple of trainings that we instantly pivoted online, which was a
Okay.
blessing, such a blessing. But at the same time, because I had just got back from Bali, I didn't miss a single beat because I wasn't sort of inundated with all of this news and information that everyone was
Mm.
receiving. I don't, maybe that's why I didn't feel like it was affecting me as much. I'm not sure. But I was like, now's the time. Now's the time. Because
Mm.
as you know, in yoga, all our studios close everywhere. You're sort of disabled, right, to do your
Yeah.
job. And everyone was sort of trying to figure things out, how to go online. And I was like, this is the time. This is it. And so I just doubled down on searching online for real estate, for spaces, businesses. Um, and I started flying to places. But at that time, we could only fly in the continental United States, which I never thought I was going to have a retreat center in the continental United States. Again, back to the island, I thought we were going to be in some
Mm-hmm.
place. And by that time, I sort of narrowed it down to a US island. So either one of the Virgin Islands or Hawaii or Puerto Rico. That was mostly in my searching range. And then, COVID. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not doing anything else. I'll just get some knowledge and information, and I'll fly to California because that's the only place probably in the United States, continental United States, I would consider because of the climate,
Mm.
really, the weather. And so I was flying out to California when no one was on the airplanes. and,
Wow.
um, and it was very cheap, and driving when there was no traffic anywhere, looking at places. I came many times and went to see many different properties. And one of the times I flew back to Maryland, I was feeling kind of defeated because we looked at some things, but nothing was really the right thing and
Mm-hmm.
resonating. And I'm like, okay, back online. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
I open the laptop and I see the dot and click the dot, and it's Ojas, but it's not Ojas. It's something else. I thought,
Location in Marietta.
yeah, wow, like this
Yeah.
could be, this is something. I knew it was
Mm.
something. And so I asked my good friend, also Dharma Yoga teacher, who we are in a nonprofit together, his nonprofit, Vet Toga, and we were working together anyway. He lived in Southern California. So I called him and I said, can you go to this property and FaceTime me? And he did. I
Oh,
went
so you
the
didn't even go in person
No, you
at
went
this point.
not. I just flew back. I mean, it was the next day.
Oh,
It
you
was
had
the
just
next
gotten
day.
back.
Yeah, I was. I was there for like 3 weeks. I flew back, and then the next day, I'm there in
Oh
Maryland on
my
my lap, and
God.
I find this place. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me, right? So yeah, called my friend Justin. I said, can you please go? And he did the next day and showed me all around. And I thought, well, it it could be something. So I booked another flight back, went back, and then that was it. It went through the whole usual things of buying a property all of the time, and inspections and everything that is involved with that, and got to a closing, and then the real work started, and it was completely a complete restoration, or big restoration
Hmm.
project.
So now that you got through and Ojas is in existence and you've been running it for 3.5 years now, 3 years now,
Three and a
right?
half years.
What do you feel like? Because I'm assuming, based on everything you've shared, that Ojas has now become your practice space. What has that been like? I was thinking about when I was there and like the power went out at one point and the wind was like crazy, the worst that you'd ever experienced. It was causing things to fly all over the place. So things happen and come up, but do you look at the retreat center now as kind of your practice ground?
100%. No question. No question. The mat is no competition for Ojas. Man, yeah, it's is huge, huge practice.
Do you feel like there are that what do you feel like has been like the biggest lesson, I guess, of owning this space?
It's such a great question. I don't know if it's. I don't want to designate it as the
Sure.
biggest
Yes.
one because I don't want to, offend any of the lessons that have been learned, uh, or any of the challenges that have been faced. But a lesson that I have learned is ease, patience, and ease.
Mm,
How to move with grace
I love
and
that.
not just physically, but mentally.
Mm.
And it is very challenging. because there's so many people coming. In a year, we have over 700 guests.
Wow.
And there, it is such an opportunity. And then, of course, it's, this place is my everything. It's what I've invested everything in, my intentions, my heart, dollars. It holds, but it's not separate from my life at
Yeah.
this point. And I can feel that in a really big way. And so the practice daily is just showing up. It's again, show up for whatever is going on that's in front of me and see if I can manage to address whatever this thing is with grace and ease. And it doesn't always work, right? Sometimes it's not graceful or easy, and I am stressed, but I'm not stressed. You see, it's like Dharma, like there's no, I'm experiencing the stress, in my mind, but it's just in my organs. It's a cellular thing. Stress is cellular nervous system. So it, to see the more ease I can add in, right, the less stress that there is, and then of course I feel better, and I know that. So yeah, I try just that. I think that's a huge lesson for me.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was thinking of your original visualization was you having peace and ease. Like those are the words you were using. Do you feel like Ojas has given you some of that in a certain way?
I feel like it's taken it away mostly most days. I think Ojas has helped me understand how to establish it in myself. Because, without challenges, of course, we can be peaceful and easy when there's no challenges.
Right.
But that's not life.
Yeah.
Right? We have challenges. And the more they say in yogis, right? The yogis ask for challenges somehow because they want to get stronger in this way.
Yeah.
And that's how I know that I wouldn't have been able to take this on many years ago, because I did not have the strength, internal strength in my practice and the resolve and just the knowledge and understanding that I have now and believe me, I notice a difference in myself now than 3 years ago with the stress and how I manage it, how I can be a little bit more trusting with nature and space and what's happening. Can't control hardly anything, when it comes to this retreat center. Like you mentioned, when you were there, it was wild. We had a crazy windstorm. The electricity went out, which has never happened before, and I hope never happens again. But nonetheless, it was, and I just said, okay, luckily I wasn't the one teaching at the time, and nobody even knew the electricity went out because it was daylight still, but I knew it immediately. And you see, that's another thing. You're so tuned in. You're just tuned into the space on such a higher level than other people. So I feel it more, I notice more, and therefore it's affecting me more. Right. In a greater way. And that's just to allow that experience is its own practice.
Absolutely.
And when that happened, the power went out, everyone is practicing, no one has any idea. I immediately went on the website and bought a generator, and we had it back at the center connected before anyone even got out of the class, right? But that's
incredible.
How fast you have to move right? There's no time. This isn't your house. You see, like this
Mm.
isn't just you. This is a whole group of people that you are hosting that have also paid money to be there, that are, having a certain experience and want to be able to continue this experience again with ease. Right. So you just act like, okay, we're just doing this. And it was perfect and nothing, a couple of things really fell into our favor. And that was one, the weather was perfect. So we didn't need any heat or air conditioning. and, uh, and that was a massive help, right, in that
Yeah.
condition. But we got out the battery operated rechargeable candles. We had them everywhere, and everyone was so amazing about it. And part of that I know is because it was a Dharma yoga retreat. Had it been, I'm so happy that it was my retreat and that we all had that collective experience and it wasn't someone else's. So yeah, but just learning how to react without drama.
Mm. That is not easy to do. But you did it incredibly well because it's like you're right. We had no idea that the power is out. And then when we did know, we were like, okay. And it made it such like a cozy experience. The candlelit kirtan was incredible that we had.
Yeah.
We all just got extra blankets that night. And I mean, yes, I do think we had a great group that very much took it in stride. And it did work to the benefit of it being a Dharma yoga retreat and all of us kind of just being in that collective energy.
Right.
But yeah, it is such an interesting thing. You were sharing some other stories about challenges that have come up with other retreats, and it's like it really is such a practice of how do I find ease through every challenge because they just keep coming and you just keep practicing.
That's right.
So I love that. Doing it without the drama is such a difficult practice and something that I think we're all challenged with that, right? We're all creating stories, we're all creating dramas that make things even more than what they need to be. And it's like that practice of going, okay, cut that out. How can I just like fix this and move on
That's right.
is so incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, one time, and I'm not saying this is a positive thing, but it resonated with me a very long time ago when I was in the finance world. One of my bosses, was in the office, and he said he had asked a question, not to me, but to another person there, and she went on to give this very involved
Mm-hmm.
answer,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, I don't want to know how to build a clock. I just want to know what time it is.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, that's so perfect, right? Just to be clear, be concise, be direct. There's no need to put all of this
Right.
in, there's no reason to involve yourself. Drama takes so much time and so much energy.
Yeah.
And if we can cut it out, then you also are not experiencing the effect of the drama
Mm.
on your mind or your body.
Such an incredible practice. I'm like, I gotta work on that. I feel like as we're talking about it. I love that. All right. Well, I could literally talk to you for a million hours, and I'm like, I'm not even sure how long we've been talking already.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
wanna,
know.
I don't want to know right now. But is there anything that you want to share that we have not covered off on now that I've had you tell me your entire life
I do
story?
feel like I've told my life story.
That has
You
a
have
tendency of happening.
you have succeeded in that.
Yes, I will take credit, or not credit, but what is the other word? I'm responsible for that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Anything else I want to share?
I mean, we covered a lot. So
Yeah.
if the answer is no, that is a-okay.
Yeah, well, it's not so much anything that I want to share, I guess. It's just more that um, I think I would maybe want people to know, on the path of wellness and whatever avenue is bringing you here to listen to this podcast or on your journey and in life, is just that it's all a practice. Like every single thing that we're doing becomes a playground for practice, and to try
Mm.
to, I know for myself, look at it a little bit more lighthearted, and to see it as it's something that's always evolving. And even today in class, Dharma said, he was doing some philosophy, and he said, you know, he pointed to himself. He said, "This, what I'm saying here is this isn't the truth. It's just what our experience is."
Yeah.
And he, like he always says, you have to figure it out. You have to learn yourself. And if you don't put the effort and attention into what's important, which is what's in front of us, it's important.
Yeah.
And how do we show up for that thing?
I love that. I love that. Actually, off of that, I'm curious, like, what would be your biggest piece of advice to someone who has that vision, that thing that they know that they're meant to do, but what they're experiencing right now isn't it, and they don't know how to get there? Like, what would be your biggest piece of advice for someone who's struggling with that?
If you have some desire or some idea of what you want to create in life, but you're seems far away from it. I mean, first off, I go back to, there's practicalities. There's practicalities to life, unfortunately, and that is that some of these visions cost money, right? So we need to have this money. If you don't have it, how are you going to get it? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to make a plan. And I know that doesn't sound very fancy, but plans, tangible plans are important, right? You have to have experience in the thing that you want to be doing. If you don't have experience, how are you going to get experience? If you need money, where are you going to get the money? Uh, if you need skills, where do you get the skills, right? So
Mm.
you just start putting in place these things step by step. It doesn't have to be fast. You can enjoy your life while you're getting to this next thing. Many times people want to give up everything and become a full-time yoga teacher, but you can't, because yoga teachers, historically known, don't make a ton of money. and and you can't just give up everything. I mean, eventually you can become very successful, but you have to do it little by little. So maybe you keep your job and you teach a few classes, maybe you do the thing you want to do part-time. There's all sorts of practicalities that we have to pay attention to, but it doesn't mean that you stop or that you don't
Mm.
try. It doesn't mean that you're stuck where you are. It means that you need to put into motion the attention that's needed. And we didn't even talk about it actually in this podcast, but fortitude, if you want something and it takes a tremendous amount of focus and determination to achieve your goals. You can't, it's just not a half-ass thing.
Yeah.
It's it's all in. And that means, I'm going to share something even Dharma shared with me today. It was a little joke, but at the end of the class, we were sort of joking around. And I said, Dharma, oh, he asked how the business was. Just very sweet. Asked how the retreat center is doing. And I said, how do you make money in the yoga business? And he said, don't worry about it. It'll come. Now, by the way, this is answered to me. Don't worry about it. That's it's going to come. But also the part that I wanted to share is he said, you have to live according to what you're doing. So basically, and he said, if you want to go on vacation and you want a nice car and you want to spend a lot of money, this is not the path.
Mm.
Do you understand? So to put all your attention and intention into your purpose or your goal requires a lot of discipline on a daily activity level, right? If I know I want a retreat center, I'm not going to go spend all of my money on something else. It's just there, hopefully making some interest. So the day that this comes, every day is a question: is this moving towards my purpose, or is this against the purpose? And it shouldn't feel constricting. If it does, perhaps it's not the right thing, or perhaps you're not completely committed to it, but that should feel exciting. It's not a impediment. It's not something that you're denying yourself, right? It's discipline is the evolution of freedom.
I love that. It's so funny because the word fortitude was sitting in my brain and I was going to say it earlier and then I forgot. And then it came out of your mouth instead of mine, which is so wild.
It's a psychic connection.
I know. All the psychic development is clearly working. But when you said that, I was like, oh my God, yes. It is the perfect word, I think, for it. And, we were talking before we started recording about how we both live in our creations, in essence. I'm living in this podcast studio. You live at Ojas. And it's like you literally live, breathe, like it is everything through your day. And it's like the amount of like being in it, I think, is a level that I don't think a lot of, like, when you're not experiencing that, you don't really understand. It's like, no, I've full blown decided, like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm moving, and I'm in it entirely. And I feel like you have that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is no separation. And I don't think, again, it's not anything that needs to be labeled as good or bad. It's just when and it is a joke that I sometimes say, I'm living the dream, right? I dreamt this, I created this, I'm living it, right? And there's a great responsibility in that, but I know I'm like, I'm the one who created this. I'm the one that put this into motion, and also I take responsibility for that when I even feel myself becoming stressed, or when you need our lives are not just about I didn't just create Ojas, right? Chris created in my mind, but it came to life because of the help of many, many people, a lot of yogis too, which is a really fun thing I love about Ojas. Is in the beginning, the amount of people that came to help and that would stay days. And we'd put together, this is a part about being organized, put together a project list we had to complete. I mean, there were just hundreds of items that needed to be addressed. And people would come and build things or whatever their specialty was, or rewire all the out. I mean, it's just incredible. And so it is definitely, even the help of contractors and paid people, just getting people into your vibration, and this idea that what I'm creating here, it's a we thing. It's something that it involves everybody, involves the energy of everybody, and then it therefore is going to benefit many, many people. And so I think that that's really important to understand in whatever you're endeavoring to do. Is this isn't It's not something that you're doing. We need many people.
Yeah.
We need people to listen to this podcast, right? We need people to show up.
I need you sitting on this couch with me.
Right. And I feel that that's important in our lives, and to show up for the yoga class, show up for your family, show up, where it's easy, show up where it's hard, show up, when you don't want to.
Yeah.
And because is good. It's a good thing to do for other people. Even today in class, you remember Dharma said, always try to help other people. Always try to make other people feel good if you have the capacity. Now, do things for others. And that way you'll also feel the benefits. You'll feel nice. So yeah, just keep going towards whatever your thing is, every day, and do a little bit. Dharma always said, do a little bit every day.
How does this dream compare to the dream of the boat or sailing?
Yeah, it's completely different, and I laugh about that all the
Yeah.
time. I mean, there I was on a floating object in the ocean, and now I have this massive piece of land in comparison in a mountain range, right? And how funny is that, But it prepared me in so many ways. The sailing and living on a boat, and sort of that concept of this is your island and you need to be able to, operate this island, has helped me a lot at Ojas. And understanding, I understand a lot of things, but I don't know how to fix everything, right? So getting someone there that can fix things, but it's not the thing that's amazing about this dream, about Ojas, is that there's no next dream. And if you know my condition, you know that is amazing. Because in all of the dreams, even like I said, there we are sailing before we even are fully out sailing. A vision comes to me that I have a retreat center, and I'm already, making a negotiation in my mind. Okay, well, maybe the retreat center is on one of these islands that we sail to, right? So now it's really amazing to be in the dream without what's next. This is it. And this in itself, believe me, it's always evolving. There's always improvements. There's always ways to do this thing with a way that serves more people. And so it's evolving in that way, but there's not another dream behind it, which feels really good.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay, let's get into our final questions before I just abduct you and you just move into my apartment.
I hope you didn't have plans tonight.
I don't. I do not. My plans are you. Okay, first question is, how would you describe your current relationship to yourself?
Grateful.
I love that. What is something you're currently working on?
I think we talked about this a lot. Ease. Grace and ease.
The ever-evolving thing. What do you consider most valuable to you right now?
I suppose something around my energy.
I love that. What is the best lesson you've learned recently?
I don't know that this is a new lesson, but it's a continual.
I'm very familiar with those.
It's a continual lesson.
Yes.
Surrender.
That one's been mine too. What do you see as the purpose or meaning of life?
Love.
I love that. Okay, well, thank you so much for spending an entire afternoon with me and talking to me for endlessly. So how can people come to the retreat center? How can they contact you? Please share.
Everyone is welcome. You can check us out at ojasretreatcenter.com. And Ojas is a Sanskrit word, not a Spanish word. So it's spelled with a J, OJAS, retreatcenter.com. You can find me there and see our upcoming retreats and connect with me through our webpage. We also have our social media pages on Instagram at Ojas Retreat. You can follow us and check us out there.
Perfect. And when is the next Dharma Yoga retreat?
Such a great question. Thank you for asking. And I do have the answer, amazingly.
Yay.
It's June 25th to 29th in 2025. So just around the corner.
Amazing. Well, I will say highly recommend it. It was so incredible doing the Dharma Yoga retreat. So anyone that's interested, definitely go check it out. Sign up as soon as you can.
Yeah.
It is something really special.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Well, thank you again so much for being on the show, for talking to me endlessly and sharing your entire life story on my couch. So I so appreciate it. It's been such a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
Aww. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Permission to Flow. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And if you want to learn more about working with me, then go to my website, jessicahwangcoaching.com. Link is below. And remember, the world needs what you will create.